to keep a culture, you have to have a good storyteller, meaning people telling the history of your people. When we know our history and the things that we've had to overcome as a family, it just roots people a little bit more in who they are. Hey guys, it's Mindi Linscombe, your host, and welcome to the Something New show, where we like to learn how to live a life worth celebrating. And today in the studio, I'm here with Jordan, and we are excited to talk to you guys about the power of family travel. This is something that we really value, and we value creating memories, learning, and connection with our kids. So we're going to go through different recommendations we have for you when deciding how and where to travel. So I'm excited to talk about this because I think we have put a lot of emphasis on travel over buying more things. So, our house is not full of toys. We have some Legos and things, but we have really put more of our money on travel and experiences than we have on items. And, we're still figuring it out. We don't know how that's going to turn out, but I think they are going to be grateful when they're adults.
I think so too. And on that, I reflect back when I was a kid, we did these massive road trips. I remember being 4 years old and I grew up in Louisiana, and we did a road trip all along the Southwest, up the West Coast to Vancouver, Canada, and then went back through Yellowstone and Teton all the way back to Louisiana. I still remember it clearly. The photos surely helped, right? Because you can see the old printed pictures in the albums. And then we did another one all the way from Louisiana to Maine and back, more of an East Coast trip. And, whether that's for people nowadays doing a road trip or flying around and traveling, I think their kids will remember so much more than they think or imagine from those powerful trips.
And it is stressful. I'm not going to lie. It is, there's many times where we're like, why did we do this in the middle of the trip? But there are some really quality moments that people talk about are core memories. And I think that we've created some core memories. I mean, even if they didn't have core memories, let me just put it this way. I've had core memories from these trips with them. So let's talk about first tip is planning ahead for this trip. So planning ahead is really important. We have a very amazing Excel spreadsheet we took basically a list of all the places we want to go before our kids graduate and things that we want to expose them to. And then we worked backwards into like key years that would be effective and more possible based on their ages or based on, finances or whatever. So we had this bucket list of like where we want to go, and we plugged that into a spreadsheet. And we've basically said by the time Bear, our oldest, graduates, we want to have had these certain experiences. But I'm going to tell you, Europe, for example, was not in the early ages of that spreadsheet because they were too young to enjoy or appreciate, or maybe it'd be too difficult even for the longevity of the travel. So when you look at the bucket list, and planning ahead for the years to come, it was really helpful for us to say, okay, what are like maybe the season of life that we're in is more important to hit. Like maybe it's a more local travel couple of years, where we stayed in state, did a lot of things that were drivable, easier for little kids. And then, as the years go by, we've been able to expand and go a little bit farther now that our kids are older.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And on that sheet, just real quick, like we dialed in what are key anniversary years for you and me. What are key birthdays, and just big family milestones. And then you overlay the trips with that. And so it really helped because now we have a good idea of like, okay, let's do this. Otherwise, we've just heard too many families say, oh, we wanted to do that, but then our oldest was gone or like life moved on. So that's what we've been trying to do is like just be really intentional about mapping that out.
Work backwards with our goals.
Yeah.
So the other thing we do is a lot of planning where we go, okay, what's our budget? So this is, again, still in that planning ahead for the successful trip. We look at what's our budget this year. Is this a good year as an entrepreneur? Are we having a good enough year that we can afford this? We've also leveraged things like airline points and hotel points to be able to afford the different trips that we've been on, trying to be really smart with our finances. And there's ways that you can say, okay, maybe there's a free place to stay because you're going to stay with family and you spend the money on the experiences. Or you have to pay for lodging, so you're going to do free outings that are state parks or whatever. So we really do make a budget. we set the dates in the calendar a year in advance where like when we're going to dedicate to a vacation. The other thing is we pack like 2 weeks in advance. I know that sounds crazy, but I like to plan ahead because I don't know about people listening, but I think when you pack the night before, you're shorthanded on certain things where I'm like, oh, I still have time to order on Amazon if I need an umbrella, or I do something that's like pretty crazy, but it's a mom hack that I decided is I Ziploc bagged each day's outfits because I have 4 kids. So I take gallon-sized Ziploc bags and I put, Monday on it and their name, and I put their outfit in it, Ziploc bag it. And so when we're on the trip, they can just grab what they're supposed to wear. And I don't have to constantly like when we don't do this, and there's been a few trips that we haven't done it, it's a little bit more chaotic because they're just grabbing their clothes throughout the whole trip. And by Wednesday, in the middle of the week, they've already used all their laundry. It's all
mixed up, yeah.
They've used all their laundry. And now if I'm not at an Airbnb, I cannot wash. And so we're stuck. So I pack early. I organize it into Ziploc bags. And then, we're kind of still in that time frame where we have time to order anything on Amazon that we might need to.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and so one thing is like picking the location as well too. We'll share some more planning hacks, but we've tried to involve our kids, like speak into it when it's appropriate or when we can. Of like, hey, what about this? Well, whether it's domestic or international. And for viewers and listeners, like what we're saying is do whatever works in your budget, like where your reality in life. But when you can, like plan ahead, get out and travel, because it just adds so much to your family memories, to experiences, helps you learn more and more. It's just travel is one of the best education aspects in the whole world.
What we've done too is we've said, what are they learning about in school?
Yeah.
And tried to like put that parallel with maybe some of the experiences, even if it's just one day of the vacation. But I remember we took a DC, Boston kind of historical trip in elementary years, and we did it coinciding with their years of learning about American history. So it was like fun, but it was mixed with education, just to see the places they're learning about in a textbook at the same time. And I think that was really bringing their education to life.
Yeah, because there was groundwork. They had learned some basics or some in-depth stuff, but then it really, became real on that trip. So, yeah, that's one aspect. Another thing is on occasion, like especially if we've gone to Europe twice as a couple, a little bit more for business in the past, but more for fun trips. We've also outsourced some things of saying like, hey, we have an idea what countries we want to go to, but how do we make the most of the time on the ground? So we've used some other companies like Rick Steves and others, or just find some experts. And what I've found is like, if we pay $60 for an hour's worth of consulting, or whether it's 100, 200, it has saved us so much time, or like prevented us from going to like worthless places, because then we had a really sharp itinerary. And after like, whether it's domestic or across the world, by the time you put in the time away from work and all the other things and you're there, like you want to make it count. And so that's just a hack that I've loved too. Even our recent trip, which we'll share about more. I was so glad we did a call, because like we know a good bit and we can figure stuff out. But man, when you pull in an expert to say like, go here, go there, don't stop, don't spend the night in Pisa, Italy. There's just the tower to see, for example, or like get on to this next city. Those were really big stress reducers and made our trips more enjoyable.
I would like to say too that when we do our spreadsheet of like years in advance planning for the trips we want to take, that we usually are on an ebb and flow of like a bigger trip, and then the next year is like a smaller, really inexpensive trip, and then a bigger trip, and then a smaller, inexpensive. And even the bigger trips, I feel like we've figured out how to do those pretty cheap as well, because now we're strategizing with our airline miles and not using them for little miscellaneous things. We're saving them for the big trip.
And hotel points too.
So, some people are anti-credit cards, but we love using credit cards because we actually, we pay them off every month, but we use them to our advantage, and we pay for things on a credit card to earn points to then cover our travel. And a lot of people are like scared of doing that. And I'm like, no, if you have self-control, you can do that. And then, like I said, our rhythm has been a local or stateside, less costly trip one year, and then a more expensive trip the following year. And we just try to rotate that.
Yep. I'd say one quick thing too, if you're interested of what credit cards I love or use and the points and things, if you DM us on Instagram at the Something New Show, be happy to chat with you and share some more ideas there.
Okay. The second thing we want to talk about is traveling with a purpose. So first of all was to plan. Second was to travel with a purpose, travel with a purpose. So, we like to talk about, okay, what are we trying to do with this trip? Is it to relax? That might be the purpose.
Mm-hmm.
It might be to expose our kids to a different culture. It might be to reiterate something they're learning in school, different interests that they have, values. But every trip we take, we state the purpose of it when we start planning so that we that's our grounding decision making process, because it's easy to overschedule and put activities into something when you're realizing, okay, wait, the purpose of this trip was to relax. So maybe we should cut back on some of the different activities. Yeah. So I just like for people to state what the purpose of the travel is,
Mm-hmm.
and then make their decisions around the trip based on the purpose of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And real quick, if you take a step back from there, I think we've tried to live out this approach of like, and we got to get better at resting more. I'll say that up front, but like resting is for at home. And then vacations, especially with your kids, we always joke, like if it's the whole family, it's a trip. If it's you and I, it's a vacation. However, vacations or trips are not like typically to totally rest, especially if you have multiple kids. Try to do that at home. But then when you go on a vacation or trip, like have fun activities or things like maybe are extraordinary life experiences, right?
Or even visiting relatives. Like that could be super fun purpose of a trip, is to like build relationship with the people you love.
Yeah. And I love that idea of like try to create and craft a life that you don't have to take a vacation away from, like to de-stress or things, and yeah, sure, there's some realities of that, but like build your life in something that you love and enjoy. And then that those vacations or trips are like icing on the cake, to make it even better memories for your family. But
let's go to the third thing, which is heritage trips.
Yeah.
So we talked about that maybe a few times on Instagram, but we've decided that we wanted to do that with each one of our parents. And the purpose of it is to bring our kids along with the grandparents to see where they're from and have them talk about it. It's like not any more complicated than that. So we went to my dad's hometown with my parents and with my kids. We asked him questions about it, had him show us the house that he was raised in and where he went to school, and tell us stories about your parents. So that would have been their great grandparents, my grandparents, just to kind of get some family heritage looped into their history. When we know our history and the things that we've had to overcome as a family, it just roots people a little bit more in who they are. And so, something I really love about the indigenous culture is they're amazing at storytelling. And it's something that to keep a culture, you have to have a good storyteller, meaning people telling the history of your people. And so when we learned all about this amazing, cultural foundation of telling stories, we said, wow, we should probably capture this before our parents are gone. Let's take heritage trips with our parents so that we can tell our kids the stories, but not from us, from actual people that are still alive, our grandparents. So we love the idea of a heritage trip. And even if you can't go back to those places, it'd be great to at least have those like intentional dinners with the parents to tell the stories. Maybe it's even over FaceTime if you don't live in the same place. But make sure you're storytelling, because I think this is an important part of your heritage.
And we've done that in Louisiana with my parents, and the kids have met their great-grandmother. She's in her mid-90s. And then we've done it with your parents. We went to Oregon, had a remarkable time with your dad, and just to see him reflect on, we stood in the mausoleum where his parents and his grandparents are there. And he got so emotional in a beautiful way of just like, once you got there in person, it's different to tell the story and to have reflection and kind of a debrief in the places where your family was or lived life. I'll never forget that. That was a priceless moment with your dad and mom. And then we'll share more, but recently we did one in another way, like with your mom, and went to Germany, which was a really fun, definitely more of a trip than vacation with the two kids plus your parents. But
four kids, you mean?
Yeah,
you said
the four kids. Yeah, we definitely have four kids.
I was like, but just back to that, when we decided to do a heritage trip, we were kind of like, oh, it'd be like, we just kind of thought, is it weird that we're initiating a trip for my parents instead of them initiating it? So we weren't sure how they would respond. But I still remember saying, hey, this is our idea. This is kind of what we're hoping to do. We want to show the kids where you're from and have you tell them about the family. No pressure. This isn't like we're going to interview you, with a camera. But we would just love to hear stories. And they were like honored by it. They felt really honored that we would want to do that. So did we turn on the iPhone from time to time? Yes, we did. We got some videos. They were just in the van. They were like very low key, but it was like really neat to not wait for them to initiate that. We took it upon ourselves. We're like, hey, we're just going to do this. We want our parents to come. We're going to do this.
Yep. And, we tied one of those to a big milestone birthday for one of your parents. And just, it depends on where you go. Like whether somebody had a great family history and they're just so excited to talk about all the details and all the stories, great. Or if it maybe wasn't, like we've geared 2 very different heritage trips, right? Of where you can at least go and experience part of your heritage and learn together along the way, regardless of what that family history was. Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about point number 4. The value of travel. So we believe it's very valuable to take your kids out of their little bubble to realize there are different ways of experiencing life. There's different languages, different cultures, different food, different ways to live, and people are just as happy in a lot of different elements. And so I think it's opening up their worldview to not be so limited when you can expose them to more. So some of our trips have been service-oriented trips where we went to, third world countries and exposed them to ways that we can serve. And when we did that, I think that they saw joy in people's faces, even when they had nothing.
Yeah. And they've talked about that trip a lot. The kids really remember that one.
Yes. And then, to the extreme of getting to go to other countries that have different languages, different food, and saying, oh, I could actually live here. This is kind of cool. So I want my kids to not be small-minded. And I think that there's so much value in expanding their worldview when you take them on a trip.
Many young professionals ask me how to navigate selecting a career with purpose. Discovering our life path can feel overwhelming and out of reach. So we developed a tool to make finding your greatest contribution practical and achievable. Head to the show notes and click the link to immediately download our practical guide to discovering your greatest contribution. This is a series of journal prompts and pages developed by me, Mindi Linscombe, to help you discover exactly where you need to be.
Part of my childhood growing up, as a family, we were working, volunteering, and serving in the country of Mexico. And my childhood, for me, it's 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, pretty much 3 years of my life. And every summer after that till we got married. So it shaped who I am. And so I love that we got to take our children, expose them to that aspect of my, story and my parents and others. But it's so valuable. And then really like personal growth really happens through extraordinary experiences. That's just one of the key accelerators of like helping someone see beyond, grow, become next level, as whether it's a child or adult. So I'll say it again. Our kids have just brought up a lot of comments or things. They're like, I remember that kid and we played basketball or we did this out in the jungle. I mean, we were in the boonies. We were not in Cancun, Riviera Maya, Tulum, where people go on vacation. Like we were out getting our hands dirty and getting to know and build relationships. It was beautiful to come alongside the work for that week. But it's priceless as well too.
Can I talk about, besides just expanding their worldview, the life skills that you acquire when you go on a trip with your kids? So we oftentimes, as little as they possibly can, we ask the youngest kid if they're able to, because the older kids are usually listening, paying attention. But I'm like, okay, let's have the youngest person do it. I ask them to navigate through the airports. So I say the name of our airline, the name of our city we're flying to, and our flight number. And I ask them to be the leader, the youngest kid. So I let them figure it out. They have to read signs. They have to look through the terminal for what gate we're at. They have to lead the way.
Yeah. Talk to staff members.
And it's been really great life skills because, even down to our 7-year-old, I feel like you could drop her in an airport and she would find the gate that we need to go to. Because I think if we just go on these trips and we take care of all of the things for our kids, it's not going to help them.
Yeah, it's a disservice.
The goal is to go on the trip and give them the chance to be the trip leader and to find where we need to go. Then a little bit older, so maybe not your youngest one, my 7-year-old couldn't do this, but my 9 and 12-year-old this summer in Germany was able to, we gave them the bus and the train system map, a paper map, and we told them where we needed to go for the day. And they navigated all of our train stops and knew where we were doing, we're going to hop off at this location and then hop on that location. And they did our whole train station navigation. We had them calculate currency.
Like foreign exchange.
So we told them what the dollar to currency rate was for the day. And so when we would buy things, we would ask them, so how many dollars is that? If it's this many pounds. So just every little experience that you can, because you've already lived, you've already done all this. The point of travel is not to do it, but to let them experience it now. Now it's time to watch them shine, but you're in the background in case you're needed. We've had them order all their meals. We've had them pay the bill. We've had them do so many of the things to figure it out so that when they leave my house, I want them to be very independent travelers. I want them to think through decisions, and I want them to think through safety, like where would I go if there was a problem? Who's the person in this area that if I had to go find an emergency medical help, where would I go? Like, we ask our kids lots of questions, and it's just part of our conversation while we're traveling. But we kind of take the back seat, even though our reservations are made for all of our hotels and everything else. We give them the itinerary and we kind of let them lead the trip. And it's been really great. And there's always a challenge. If it's too hard for the 9-year-old, we bump it up to the 12-year-old. If it's too hard for the 12-year-old, we bump it up to the 14-year-old. But start with your youngest person. And then if they get stuck, get a helper with the next older child.
Yeah, absolutely. That was one of my favorite things from our trip to Germany this last month. But our 12-year-old was all about the trains and the subways. And he was memorizing it. Mindi, he was like, no, we go here and we stop there. And I could see it in his eyes. He was just like, I'm learning this. I'm figuring this out.
And do you know how many adults don't know how to read a map?
Yeah.
I feel so bad about that. I'm like, but I learned how to read a map when I was a little kid because my dad made me figure it out. And I'm like, this is great. Let our kids learn how to read a map, learn where to, read signs. Because even in multiple different languages and different places we've had them figure out based on the signs where we need to go. It's just been great. Okay, number 5, we think that traveling can create formative family memories. So like I talked about earlier, is core memories, and those can strengthen the bond in relationships.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even this last trip I took, there were several moments that honestly I endured, or I just had to emotionally suck it up and be like, you know what? I'm going to remember the good stuff about this day far more than how I feel right now. I might feel exhausted, or I wanted to sleep in more, or stay at that last location a little longer, right? We had 3 nights in Austria on a trip we just went on, which was not our norm. It was an exceptional trip we've been planning for years. But
4 years. It was for 2020, and then it was COVID, but that's great.
Those 3 nights in Austria are magical, and I could have just parked it there for 10 days. But then we moved on. We tried different parts of the trip. I went to Salzburg, Sound of Music tour. I'm glad we did it. Not as much my jam, but then I look back and the memories of the fact that we did that. We went on that Sound of Music tour and all the different locations. It feels so much more fulfilling and exciting now for me as a dad and all the things going on than maybe in the moment. And so when I travel, sometimes I'm like, you know what? Let's keep a great attitude. Let's help facilitate great experiences for the kids. Keep asking good questions or help them notice things, to learn from the trip. And I just kept telling myself this is going to be better. The memories are going to be better than maybe how I feel at the moment.
Well, first of all, Sound of Music was totally my jam.
It was.
I'm sorry it wasn't yours, but who doesn't love Sound of Music? And then getting to go to all the places in the movie was
we climbed every mountain. We forded every stream.
It was my dream. Okay, but let's talk briefly about documenting those memories in this point of creating the core memories. So obviously, we're all taking pictures and video on our phones. But one thing we've been doing when we remember is on the way home from the airport, because we have about an hour drive from our main airport to our house, we would get a voice memo started on our phone. And I remember we did this for a few trips. We should not forget to do this, but we didn't do this last trip, but we need to do more, is we would turn on the voice memo recording on our phone and we would say, okay, let's talk through what we did every day on this trip. We are on our way home. Okay, so we had an hour in the car. This usually took about 30 minutes. And we would say, okay, first day, we went to such and such. And we'd pass the phone around, and you can hear their little voices. Oh, I loved that first day. We did da-da-da. And, they talk about their highlights. Day 2, we went to, what do you guys remember? And we pass the phone around like a microphone, and we tell stories of the fun trip we made together. And then those voice memos of, that 30-minute car ride, recollecting the trip, has so helped me cement what we did. And when I forget, I'm like, I can always go back, and to hear their little voices is so sweet. To hear that I mean, you could also do this on video, I guess.
Yeah.
It's
And
just,
be encouraged. You got them on video as we left the hotel in Germany. Like, what was their favorite thing from the trip, et cetera. So you're doing better than you remember.
yes. But the voice, in the car from the airport to home, before you get out of the car and the trip is over
And life restarts.
and you have to start the laundry, get a memory and get a voice recorder out at least and get everybody talking about their favorite things from day 1 to day 7 or however long your trip was. Okay, number 6.
Well,
Okay.
I'm gonna jump around, to the technology part because it really stuck out to me. Because you and I went to Europe in 2006.
Wait, let's say the title.
Yeah,
Section 6 is about technology to enhance the travel experience.
Yeah. Now we went to Europe in 2006. It was like our first time together. We had gone on a study abroad with like 40 people. That was a bit of a zoo and different experience. But after 1 year being married, we went to 4 countries in Europe. And it was still pretty basic. Like Facebook was just emerging. iPhones weren't out yet. And I remember like the logistics of that were a bit more like internet cafe and, maps and paper. And then to go back now, I just was so impressed. Like the Munich city transportation app had subways, trains, and above ground trains all in the same app. And so as a family, when we needed to go somewhere, I would just type in, we are here. We need to go there. What's the best route? And it would map it out for me. Pretty incredible. I could use Apple Pay and just pay for everybody's ticket, like right on my phone. Fast forward, that night, this is just more like a business factor. Like I was also struck, like I had to do payroll and some other aspects for our business. And as we were walking the streets of Munich, I could do payroll in my left hand with our bank app as we were on this trip, and so there was some work to still do at segments throughout the trip, and I just was it just stuck out to me so much how things have changed. And a lot of times for the better, that things are so much more accessible in your hand. And the world has, just become so much more connected and easy to get around and travel. And then driving was fairly easy in Germany and Austria. Renting a car, all the aspects, like I was like, okay, this is pretty slick. Now we had to plan ahead. We had everything reserved well in advance. But having that all mapped out and the technology to support us made for a much better experience.
I want to go at it a little bit differently. I want to talk about technology for your kids.
Yeah.
So we are not huge into getting our kids in front of screens. We're really mindful about how much screen time they have every day. Now, the last 30 minutes before they go to bed. Oftentimes we're scrambling, still finishing bath time, and there's a show on to help people calm down before we do like a prayer and go to bed. But in general, our kids don't have tablets. They don't have a phone. My oldest one just got a phone. He's a freshman in high school with a lot of restrictions on it. But I'm just saying we're kind of like really minimal when it comes to the general population when it comes to screen time. Mm-hmm. However, we decided that we were going to do something as a gift to ourselves, and we were going to buy the cheapest, most basic Kindle Fires for like $50 on Amazon Prime Day, and we were going to get these things that we dubbed as travel tablets.
Travel tablets.
And so what we would do is we would save them and lock them up just for when we travel. And we would bring them out, and we'd have downloadable games that were all safe and already on there, so it wasn't like web access. And we would let our kids use the travel tablets on the plane or in the car when we were traveling to our destination. And it was like something for them to look forward to, but also it was something to provide a little bit of sanity for the two of us that are also trying to juggle logistics, bottles, snacks, all the things. So I don't think technology is a bad thing when you use it in the appropriate amount and in the right time. So I think parents that maybe are listening and you are torn about this, I think this is a really great approach. It's like a hybrid. It's like, okay, I'm not going to give my kid a tablet all the time, but when I travel, this is a great time to use it, and with controls, with mindful controls.
Yep. And in that, there's like a rhythm of connection and disconnection, right? Where we're like, hey, we're going to be off screens, or we're going to create space for family discussion, or just, hey, how you doing? How you feeling? Or what was your favorite thing about this day? So having a plan or like some basic rules, even in your heads as parents, that helps.
They're not using it every day on the trip. They're using it only in the travel moment. So like on the way there, on the way back, or if there's a long commute somewhere in the middle of the trip, when you're traveling and sitting because you're getting transported is when we allow them to use it. Okay, let's wrap up with some final summarizing thoughts to give yourself, some ideas for travel.
if this is new for someone and they haven't done much, I would just encourage them, like, step into new territory, and like, even if it's a domestic trip or somewhere.
A day trip.
Yeah,
You could do a day trip in just your area. You could drive somewhere cool that you've never seen. Maybe you live by a waterfall or you live by a lake. I don't know what it is, but just start with a day trip.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so start somewhere, or just keep stretching yourself in healthy ways. I think that's great. I would say too, for like the family or the couple, maybe they just go to like Cancun or somewhere comfortable, like they feel like that works for them. If that's your jam, hey, great. But like in our view, we've tried to stretch ourselves and say, like, let's keep some really cool variety so that the learning and the development for us and for our kids really, gets to different places on the map, different cultures, different types of trips, right? Like you're saying, like service-oriented trips. We've done 7 or 8 with an organization that we love in Florida, and we just help build a culture of serving and travel for our kids. And so if somebody's just in the same thing, I would encourage them as well too, like, try something different, try something that's a little bit of a stretch for you, and you might be pleasantly surprised.
And then my summarizing thoughts would be, make your kids do it all and make them talk to people, because something I love about my kids, if you met them, they can hold a conversation with a stranger. And I think it's because since they were able to talk, I made them advocate for themselves. And I love it. They can sit by a stranger on the plane. They can meet people in the airport. They can do wherever you put them, they'll have a conversation. And I think that's cultivated by us. The parents have the power to decide if they're going to be good at connecting with people outside of just their family members. So
yeah,
help
absolutely.
Help them to ask good questions, to advocate for themselves. It's just a great experience.
Yeah, and then in summary, like you said, the power of the debrief, or like bringing it back up, as you go home a week, a month later, reflecting back as part of the learning journey. It really helps us as adults for sure. So take advantage of that and make it a great topic. So as we wrap up today, we just want to let you know that really traveling as family is a part of building a life worth celebrating. That's what this show is about. And we share all these tips because this is something that's really been meaningful for us as a Linscombe family and creating a life worth celebrating for us. So a couple of things I want to challenge you today. One, again, let us know in the comments, whether on YouTube or Instagram, where is your favorite place that you went as a child or that you have taken your family? We really want to hear from you on your tips or like best places that you go and that have worked well for you. Or even a dream location that you can't wait to go and visit. And then secondly, if you have any questions or tips and you want to pick our brain more on point systems or credit cards or other traveling hacks that have worked, Mindi is an incredible planner, always planning ahead, packing ahead for our crew and our family. So we'd be happy to connect on that. But follow the show, like, subscribe, please share with a friend, especially if they're into travel. We'd be honored to continue to connect with you here on the Something New Show. So thanks so much for joining us today. Cheers to all of you, and we will see you next episode.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe to the show, rate, review, and share with a friend. Also, follow The Something New Show on Instagram and Facebook. If you want a fuller experience, watch the show on YouTube to help you create a life worth celebrating.